what won't go away if you love the show Mad Men is the true creativity that humans bring to the table, because all said and done, I believe generative AI or AI is aping humans, right? It's only learning from what we feed it and then extracting some more information. But end of the day, human creativity could not be replaced.
Welcome to the AI CEO podcast, where the future of business is built today. I'm SMa&x, founder of Virgin AI, growth strategist, co-chair of DC Startup and Tech Week, and your host. In this podcast, I sit down with CEOs, industry experts, founders, and investors to tackle the big pressing questions on your mind about AI. No hype, no jargon, just insights you need to stay ahead. Now let's dive in. The AI CEO podcast is brought to you by Virgin AI, helping mid-sized businesses accelerate AI adoption safely. Ready to lead with AI? Visit virgin.ai to learn more. Welcome to today's episode of the AI CEO podcast. I am your host, SMa&x, and I am really excited to talk with this guest today because when I used to ask, who are the leaders in AI in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area, and especially the women, and I would always hear, do you know Swathi Young? Have you heard of her? She's done incredible work on implementation, on thought leadership, and a lot of conversations on the future of AI and ML. And I'm excited because she is my guest today. Welcome, Swathi.
Thank you, Seema, for having me. And I also am excited about your relaunch of the podcast and look forward to all the new episodes.
Amazing. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. So, in terms of way of background, Swathi, you are what we consider a fractional CTO focused on AI and ML. You've done many, many implementations of projects on the enterprise level and the startup emerging technology level.
Yes.
I'm going to start off with the question, where do you think we are going to be in this world, knowing what you know with the power of AI and ML in 5 years?
That's an awesome question because depending on who you ask, the answer will be different. So, funny story, I was at a comedy show right down the street.
And we were at Adams Morgan, so.
Yeah, in Adams Morgan in Washington, D.C., and there was a bad joke about AI. So they said, always say thank you to your AI. So if it goes sentient, it will be good to you. I thought the joke was good, but there was so much apprehension in the crowd about AI. And I wanted to just shake everybody up and say, hey, whether you like it or not, you use AI in your fingertips today. You use Uber, search pricing uses AI. Did you know that? And your spam filter, because 10 years ago we got emails from Nigerian uncles offering you money and you no longer get those spam filters. It uses AI. Google search uses AI. Netflix, Amazon, the list goes on and on.
Yes.
So although there is this bad rap in the public about AI, everyone is using AI without their knowledge. So I just think that there will be more and more adoption of common consumers or usage of AI. And you and me might be using ChatGPT a lot. For me, it triple X my productivity as a knowledge leader. But I think for consumer perspective, there will be more embracement of AI and they will realize how much productivity gains can be had in their day-to-day life, whether it's a teacher, whether it's a retail salesperson, whatever walks of life, that's from the consumer perspective. From an enterprise perspective, I think the adoption is very nascent. It's just tip of the iceberg, and we'll dig deeper into that.
Of course.
And I think enterprise adoption is where it will take off. And the third thing I want to emphasize, since we are in Washington, D.C., is the public sector adoption. Today, many states still people cringe going to the DMV to get their renewal of license and other things. There's so much potential of AI to streamline that process. We have the technology today, but in 5 years, I hope that embracing of the technology to automate workflows for citizen engagement, to make our lives so much easier was what I see and not some uber super intelligence taking over.
I love it. I have so many questions just in your opening statement, but let's start with 18 to 24 months. The opinion is, and I share this opinion, most workflows and industries will be disrupted by AI.
Mm-hmm.
Do you agree or do you disagree, and why?
I am on the fence, I want to say. I am bullish about adoption of AI, but I still feel when I look, especially in the spaces I am in the enterprise and public sector, there's a long way to go in the 18 to 24. If one is the data infrastructure readiness, but two is change management, because if there is a statistician doing a job today, tomorrow, a machine learning engineer is going to automate that job. If there is a radiologist doing a job in healthcare, tomorrow the machine learning engineer is going to automate. And then you do have radiologists, but not as big as a team, right? So 18 to 24, I think where AI can really disrupt industries is if they can utilize it for newer revenue streams. That's where just efficiency improvements, those are all table stakes. They should do it in order to be in the market, to exist. But I think the true disruption will come if they can identify use cases for newer revenue streams. And so enterprises have to innovate.
I just wanted to pause there because you said, productivity enhancements and efficiency are table stakes. Not everybody understands that. Right. So in a way, creating automated workflows, creating things that take a long time in terms of task-oriented work today to make those things simpler, faster, easier, more convenient, that's a process in itself. And it is a disruption, right? So I completely agree with you when it comes to any emerging technology cycle, that there is going to be those additional revenue streams, new business models that really stand out, just like the internet did with Amazon and the Googles and it shifted the worlds of the blockbusters. And, there's so many actual realities that we know that we are seeing now, but we're going to see even more substantially.
Right.
So I guess it's interesting because I think that word disruption, it has different meaning and connotation, but I love your perspective on that. So one of the themes of this podcast, I really want to focus on your expertise in implementation of AI and ML, right? I know maybe you can just give 2 minutes of who you are and your background so people understand the context, and then we'll go into some of the use cases.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So my background, way back a couple of decades ago, I was a developer sitting in a cubicle in India with my heads down writing code. And soon I was very unhappy, and this was in my early 20s. And I realized actually I'm very, very curious as to where my code is being used. And I was working for Oracle, writing a code for Oracle at that time. And I was like, I have no idea. I really want to know where my code is being used by people and not, I think my interest doesn't lie in just coding. So that took me to Oracle Consulting, where I actually worked in Belgium for some time for GE, and there I actually sat with the business user who used the code that I had written in Oracle in one of the modules. So that was pretty, satisfying to see.
What was it?
It was Oracle procurement. Okay. So it was the whole cycle of placing a requisition, purchase order, the workflow approval that was in the Oracle ERP system. So it was very, very like a light bulb moment for me that I do come from a STEM background and engineering background, but I did have a lot of theater and dance I did in school. So those two abilities of mine merged, and I think my superpower is really understanding business. I get very curious to understand my business process, but I still am very interested in how to architect a solution that enables and solves a business problem. So that took me to consulting, and later I did a lot of consulting in multiple states in the US from Belgium when I moved to the US. And then I went to a product company because I was interested in launching new products. So I think I would say the theme is curiosity. Curiosity was driving me to try different things. I want to know from scratch, how do you launch a product from a blank sheet of paper to actual production, right? This was the early days of a private cloud solution that I helped launch at Sungard. And then I moved to Amtrak because of personal reasons. I came to the DC area and I managed their large engineering team that did the whole omni-channel reservation systems. So a lot of software engineering. And then within few years, this was around, I want to say 2015 and 16, I started hearing about machine learning. And as a true engineer, the engineering side of my brain, I was like, I want to learn what this machine learning is. So I dug deep and got into the weeds. And I was very grateful that I got a lot of opportunities to work early on AI and machine learning projects. So and that's my background. In the last 4 years, I've been a fractional CTO because I get to choose some very interesting projects. For example, I've worked on AI/ML implementation in lung cancer research for Roswell Park University Hospital. Then I did some AI for transportation. And most recently, now I'm leading at least 4 generative AI implementations in public sector as well as enterprise as well as startup. So I think this fractional CTO role has enabled me to work on super interesting projects, which I'm super grateful for. So that's where I am today.
Well, you mentioned you moved from coding to the idea of AI and ML 8-9 years ago, started to bring curiosity to you. First of all, I love the word curiosity because I think that is probably the foundations of any entrepreneurial mind, because you are always wanting to learn more and you're always trying to solve problems in different ways. And I think your ability to pick up that AI and ML was going to be where everything is heading. And I know you and I chatted a little bit about that previously. That's found amazing to me because look at where we are now, look at where we're going, right?
Yeah.
Now that the next question around that is, how did you move from, just like coding per se and actually start to think through these newer infrastructures? And now we're at a whole different place, right, for where AI and ML is, even from 8-9 years ago. So how did that transition happen, and what were a couple of the initial projects that you were able to work on?
So I think the true movement happened when I moved from actual coding to a leadership position in engineering, right? So I was an individual contributor, then I did product management, then I went back to leading engineering teams. So when you are leading engineering teams, you do wear multiple hats. You no longer do coding, but you review the architectural decisions. And this is at an enterprise level. So you think about scalability, security, reliability. So I was already at that level where I was architecting solutions at a scalable level for enterprises. And then, yes, the curiosity was to understand how machine learning works, but not necessarily, again, coding from an architectural perspective. So when I went on my own and I started doing some consulting, I started also educating some of my clients the potential of AI ML. And like I said, I'm grateful for the opportunities to work with some forward-looking leaders who gave me the opportunity to say, hey, this is a use case in lung cancer research that we're struggling with. How do you think machine learning can help? So, for example, one of the lung cancer surgeon had a hypothesis that there is fat deposits in the human body, especially in the vertebrae, that impacts lung cancer surgery patient recovery. And today, he was using a radiologist to measure the deposits in the CT scan. Now, the question
manually.
And we actually sat and went through the process with the radiologist. It took 20 to 30 minutes for him. And the question to me is that, hey, can AI solve this problem? And this was a couple of years ago. And I said, yeah, absolutely. There were some computer vision that could actually automate what the radiologist was doing. And quickly, within a matter of a few seconds, read that fat deposits so that the lung cancer surgeon can know among all the surgeries he performed, how many have that fat deposit over a particular limit that could impact the patient outcome, right? So I think those use cases are really, for me, super exciting, both as a technologist, but also more importantly, the outcomes, improving patient outcomes.
I think that's the moment of truth when you realize the work that you do can make a huge difference, right? And then you want to go deeper and deeper into what can the power of this technology actually accomplish? Because precision medicine, for me, I think I shared, I'm going to be on a panel in front of 70 to 90 community health center CEOs in the next few hours. And their whole business model is to take care of patient outcomes. And how do you use, the question is, how do you use AI to make it even better, right?
Yeah.
How exciting is that?
It is super exciting.
Right? That's why I think, and that's why I want to go deeper and deeper in some of your curiosity, because I think maybe the better question to be asked is, how did you realize that this technology can actually solve these types of problems, right? And what were some of the problems that you were solving? So the lung cancer one is a really good example. So let's just dig into that really quick in terms of implementation, right? Because that's just, so what I understood is this doctor had a theory that if you look at these fat deposits, that then now we can understand in terms of the recovery time for a lung cancer patient who's been through surgery.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm assuming at this place, I don't want to assume, you can share, but like he's done enough research to know that that's a fact or truth. And now he wanted to figure out a way to take a manual process and automate it through AI.
Right. And I think, obviously, I'm not a lung cancer surgeon expert, and I'll talk more about how much time we spent with him because technologists and data scientists don't know the domain. And the more domain knowledge we get, the better we can architect solutions. That's why I said my superpower is understanding and digging deep into the domain knowledge so we can architect technology solutions. And technology then becomes a true enabler of solving business problems. But yes, it was his hypothesis. He had enough knowledge and he was working with the radiologist who was helping him measure that fat deposit through a CT scan.
Okay. I love pausing at moments because I think there's a lot of gold in what you just said, because there are a lot of companies that will architect a solution without really understanding the business side of things.
Exactly, yeah.
And, your, just the way that you stated that is like, we wanted to make sure that we understood the domain in a way to create a better, more curated solution is just so important, right? Anybody who is working with any expert in the field to help support you, you want to make sure that they have that level and that capability, because or else it becomes, here's the business requirements, now go do it.
Yes.
And to me, that's when a lot of the implementations go awry. Could you speak to that for a few minutes? Is there any thoughts on that from your side?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of engineers, and I used to be guilty of this many moons ago, is like we love to work on new, shiny technologies. We like to be heads down and we like to code, which is a part of me. But the other part of me doesn't want to do all that until I understand the business domain. And that is my true differentiator as a technologist, right? Because a lot of technologists love to be heads down. I think the more technologists get involved in the business conversations, and Agile is a great way, I think, if they actually involve the development team and their data scientists in the requirements, they hear from the business. And it actually will be motivational for them for two reasons. One is they really understand the problem and the impact they can have if they architect and write good code or pick good algorithms. But secondly, they also know straight from the horse's mouth what problem they're trying to solve, but not all engineer mindsets are the same, right? A lot of engineers are not interested in that. So I think with the business domain, I try to learn, obviously, on my own. I spend insane amount of time both learning newer technologies and if there is a specific, like for insurance tech, I've never worked in insurance before. I'm learning a lot. Like internet is a great place to start. So first, get up to speed with that domain, but also try to ask the person who you're working with in that domain, like deep questions to unearth, the problems that we as technologists don't know and which are very important and very nuanced for the solutions we architect.
Yeah. So I want to keep going on this lung cancer one, and then we'll move on to another use case in terms of data, right? How did you guys validate what, the computer vision was doing to say, yep, this is actually correct and it will be correct and accurate ongoing? The other part of it is around any sort of privacy governance. Like, what was the thought process around that as you were architecting that solution and then doing the quality assurance of ensuring that it was accurate?
So I'll start off with the first thing, because for every AI project, the first question is, what is your data source? And with the lung cancer, we actually bought publicly available CT scan images. We did not use their hospital's data. So the publicly available CT scan images are already scrubbed and anonymized. So we wrote our algorithms on top of publicly available data. And especially in healthcare, there's HIPAA, and there is actually a whole framework called federated technology, where first you test on your publicly available data set. And then when it is all appropriate, you can actually use federated framework technology to use it on the hospital data. So that's the first part. We actually did it on publicly available data. The second part is for the testing is when we had to spend a lot of time with the lung cancer surgeon, because this is his expertise, is the true domain knowledge, because whatever we do, we can only learn so much, nothing like he who's performing the surgery, right? So it was a combination of, the accuracy that we could tell, we can present to him at some point, right? So if it is 85% accurate, and then he looks at the false positives and the false negatives, and then did the true testing.
Yeah, I love that. And at this stage, there's a concept of humans being in the loop, right?
Exactly.
So there's a level of initially was completely manual. It took 20, 25 minutes to review with the radiologist to see, to try to even get a perspective on that fat deposit. Now with the computer vision and sort of the architecture that you put together, it happens in minutes, right?
Yeah.
And provide some sort of analysis reporting to him, and I'm assuming his team and whoever else now is using this, has that opportunity to review it and use that now data for making those calls with the patients, right?
Right.
So human in the loop, how do you feel the current state of AI is with ensuring that humans are always in the loop? Do you think we're getting closer to not needing that right now? What's your perspective on that?
I think it truly depends on the use case. So one of the things that I often talk about is under generative AI implementation, you have two subdivisions. One is using a large language model, and one is using AI agents. And so whenever you need the human in the loop, your use case needs the human in the loop, I recommend using a large language model. So for example, you have a lawyer's office, they're inundated with a lot of contract documents. Say this is typical corporate lawyer. I'm not speaking about criminal justice. That's a whole other use case. But corporate law, they have a lot of contract documents. Now use a large language model to review the documents, summarize the documents, potentially highlight some risky paragraphs they have to review. So you're saving the lawyer's time, and they can come and take the recommendations of the LLM, and then they work on it. So that is one use case of an LLM. Take AI agents, right? Suppose you're a large enterprise and you have 10,000 plus employees and contractors, and you have an IT help desk every day. And this is worldwide employees. This is like a Deloitte or any other big company. And you have employees flooding an IT help desk for password resets, login resets. Now you can truly automate that whole password resetting, login or resetting, or if there's anything to do with their computers, you can point them to some documentation. You can truly automate it end to end using AI agents. That's the second use case of generative AI agents, where you don't need human intervention for this simple use case, that thereby you're saving time of the sys administrators to perform higher level tasks and debugging higher level tasks, right? So those are the two. I think it's totally driven by the use case. Yes, you can automate a lot of end to end, but there are a lot of use cases where you do need human intervention.
Yeah, I think that is going to be an ongoing conversation in terms of, you're right, it is dependent on the use case, but the more complex and a implementation is the ideal situation to have humans in the loop right now, or does it matter again on use case?
I think it will matter on the use case. There are a lot of simple things that are very repetitive, and you don't want humans to spend a lot of time. You could truly automate it. There are a lot of use cases we see in everyday life. Like, I think we all hate calling a customer service representative on the phone. Yeah, I hate it. I will postpone it as much as possible, and finally I have to do it because they've not used technology, right? They don't recognize you with your phone number. They want all your history again. That's a simple case of end-to-end automation that could be totally possible, and then use the human only to solve my problem that couldn't be solved by the end-to-end process, right? But there are, you're right, complex use cases where we do need human intervention. And like I said, the criminal justice, actually, Politico did a story, right? There was one use case where they used AI actually to make a bailable offense determination and a recommendation provided to the judge. And that is scary because, yes, humans, and this is a lot of people debated with me on this topic, like humans make errors all the time, yes, but human judgment is different from a machine's judgment, which is based on a lot of data that you're feeding it.
So going back to that reality, right? There was in this case, the lawyers used a large language model to ask for certain court, examples, and they were wrong, right? So in your earlier example of a generative AI model for lawyers, right? You talked about large language models, but is there additional things to ensure that some of these hallucinations, which are like wrong answers, what are some of the current guardrails that can be put in place to create a end-to-end sort of solution that will limit some of these risks, for like companies or industries like legal?
Yeah, the crux of that question lies in your RAG, right? So
can you explain what a RAG is?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The acronym, I think you should ignore. It's a mouthful. It's Retrieval Augmented Generative AI. But in simple terms, LLM was built by scraping the internet. We all know it's guilty of reading copyrighted information, et cetera.
Billions and billions of data sets
across the World Wide Web.
Right.
But how does the LLM know a question pertinent to your organization? If you do not use RAG, it wouldn't know. It will give you the generic answer that a chat GPT would give you. So the only way that you can feed your corpus of your knowledge base, what I call knowledge base, is your organization's data as an Excel spreadsheet, SharePoint documents, Confluence documents, just Word documents, that dump, and it's in somebody's brain also sometimes, the rules, all those unwritten knowledge bases. So you feed all that and into this corpus of your own knowledge base. That's the RAG, right? So RAG is the core and crux of any generative AI implementation for your organization because it brings your knowledge and combines it with the power of LLM using a prompt.
And you can have guardrails around that to train it so that would you consider it to fully mitigate hallucinations now that it's trained on your own data, or is there still a chance?
There is still a chance because there is 3 steps when you implement a generative AI use case. One is create your RAG, which is your knowledge base. Second step is add a prompt. What are you expecting the LLM to answer for you? And third is the LLM itself. So as long as there is an LLM, and you do need the power of the LLM because...
And just so LLM, ChatGPT, Gemini, I mean, there's multiple different ones, right? And we're going to get into how you choose that type of stuff. But
So large language model is the generic terminology, and you have many types of large language models, ChatGPT, Gemini is a couple of examples. Then you have Claude and Meta Llama as well. So those 3 steps, right? So you add the prompt and feed it to the large language model. As long as there is a large language model, there could be potential hallucinations. So you always have to test it enough. And there is more and more research coming up with newer algorithms to even test for hallucinations. So it's a work in progress. There's a lot of work to be done there.
So I think that you bring up a really good point because a lot of times when emerging technologies start crossing the chasm, you start to see open issues. There are startups or enterprises working on solving them.
Yes.
And that's one of them, right?
Correct, yes. And a lot of research papers, exactly. And the startup utilizes that research to create a tool to catch hallucinations. Or even I've seen some robust testing tools that will test for hallucinations.
Yeah. So let's go into a couple more use cases. You talked about the lung cancer. Can you share maybe the fintech one? You started to talk a little bit about that when we were chatting about the lung cancer one. So can you tell us what is that use case and what specifically that you're working on solving?
So it's a startup in the fintech space. So the problem they're solving is for small to medium-sized businesses to use the power of generative AI to be a true co-pilot for them to do strategic planning. So if I'm running a bakery, for example, I'm either running the business, hiring new people, firing people in the bakery, but I might not have time to say, this is my strategy, this much of revenue I want to make for 2025, but I don't know what are the risks. For example, the bakery is near Capitol Hill here, and now people are back to office, so there's an increase in the number of orders at the bakery. So risks and opportunities, depends truly on the political climate and external factors, some controllable, some not controllable. And you see when actually a publicly traded company has to list the risks when they file at the SEC. But a small bakery, they don't know any better. They're running their shop and they are running so fast that they don't have time for it. Whereas now with the power of generative AI, now generative AI knows a lot of things because it studied from the internet. It collected all the data from the internet. So we built a generative AI copilot for a small business, even extended to a medium-sized business, that if they explain in simple terms about their business, give their website and upload their documents, it will do all the strategic planning with milestones, tell you the risks based on the current political scenario, your location and other factors, provide you some newer opportunities, and all these things in a very streamlined manner. And one of the use cases also that we could partner with a bigger level company like an ADP to provide it to their small and medium-sized businesses.
So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's the licensing play potentially.
Yeah.
Because what I heard in that model, and just for perspective from a startup space, because it's one thing to say, hey, this is a strategic planning tool, which does solve a lot of problems. There are some out there already, I've seen, right? But then the goal is that now it's like, that's a role that you either had to hire an expert for, a consultant, and now that the tool is in-house and you're continuing to train it. It's only going to know your business almost sometimes better than you and be able to give you those right sort of suggestions and recommendations. But the bigger play that I heard was, let's get it right for our business, and I'm assuming a couple others, and then let's use it as a potential license for another play.
To a channel partner.
Channel partner. So B2B to C, which is very interesting. And in that model, would they white label it to the channel partner?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we just launched the MVP on March 6th. So I took, again, talking about super interesting projects that solve some problems, started off from a blank sheet of paper in September, and we launched on March 6th.
Wow.
And early adopters. And the business owners are truly blown away because even me as an independent consulting, I gave it and I gave for my own, and gave me so many opportunities that I could think of. They were like, you should partner with this firm to do a webinar and all these things, which I know because I use ChatGPT, but I didn't have time to, document all that and have milestones for myself. So it's like super interesting. All the small business owners are blown away by it. But true differentiator, talking about newer business models, is those channel partners that you bring.
So let's talk about this implementation a little deeper, and then I want to turn to enterprise. But I'm going to start here because what were the challenges? Like, what was the process to go from idea to prototype to actually commercializing something like this?
So the process actually is no different from what it was before, right? It's a lean startup process. You start with the business model canvas, but my role was both, I think I bring both the ability to do a go-to-market strategy and the architecture, and also debug code if needed, which I did for the very first time after many, many years. I actually did some prompt engineering for this, which was super interesting and a lot of learning for me. But the process was, obviously, this is a generative AI implementation. And whether it's a startup or an enterprise, those tools are not robust yet. So we were using Microsoft Azure Cloud, and the RAG tool we used was Azure Search. And there were a lot of kinks. So basically, the biggest challenge we had, and I'm skipping, we start with the architecture, then we configure everything on the cloud. But the biggest challenge we had was, this is a real-time use case. So one of the things that I'm noticing both in AWS and Microsoft is they're not, the generative AI tools are not yet ready for real time. So basically, a small business comes, hey, I uploaded my document, now give me an answer. And those of us using websites, we are used to getting answers in seconds. And this takes a couple of minutes because you're feeding the document. Generative AI is like LLM is digesting the document and your information and providing you. So there's a time lag, and we were working with Microsoft to reduce that time lag as much as possible. Again, RAG also had its challenges to parse any document that you give or parse your website. Depending on how large your website is, it can take a couple minutes to go get all the data, digest the data, and give you a relevant answer. So in terms of latency, I'm observing for real-time use cases, it's still a challenge.
It's still a challenge. And what do you think, what needs to happen to solve it? Is it at infrastructure level?
It's a very much at an infrastructure level because your large language model is built on so many GPUs. So if you want, I think there is an emergence of small language models that could be very domain specific that could really make it very fast.
Yeah. Let's, you mentioned AWS and, Microsoft, different sort of infrastructure products. I think one of the challenges when you're creating anything is like, and I'm assuming the answer is going to be come to a company like yours or ours or others to figure out like the solutions architecture. But if you were a emerging technology sort of startup, is there an easier way to start to think about those end-to-end solutions? Or what are those infrastructure needs? Because that's when it gets a little like, okay, I have an idea, I have a thought, I want to get to that end goal, but what does it really take to create a smart AI solution?
Yeah, so I would say there are a couple of steps. I would enumerate 3 to 5 steps. One is, first of all, think about, always start with the use case. What problem are you solving for and for whom? And for generative AI, especially, it's very nuanced because it's not a deterministic model. When I say deterministic, not to use jargony, but it's not saying yes or no or 1 + 1 = 2. It's as statistically probable. You have all played with ChatGPT. It will give you the nearest realistic answer, and you might take it and edit it, right? So you also need to have, when you're implementing generative AI, what does that answer look like? If I'm strategizing for a small business, what does that answer look like? We need to know what good looks like to even know whether their generative AI is producing a near realistic output, right? So writing that prompt will depend on understanding what does good output look like from your generative AI. That's number one. But yeah, to your point, 1, the use case, including what does good look like. 2, your data for anything. So where is your data coming from? Yes, it is your in-house data, your organization data. Where have you captured it? First, understand that layout of the land. And 3, build or buy decision. I think you wanted to talk a little bit about it. So the buy decision, if you're implementing machine learning, that technology has been there for a couple of decades. We've all used Amazon and Netflix for 1 decade at least. So that's robust. But if you're talking about generative AI, the buy decision is very tricky. There are way too many startups which we don't know will exist in a couple of years or not. So the best suggestion I would say is, even for the startup, for the fintech startup, right? We used Microsoft Azure because you're only paying for the things that you use. So you use any cloud, whether it's AWS, Azure, or even Google GCP, you can build a custom solution. At least the infrastructure is there. And the interesting thing is, especially AWS has so many use cases. If you are using a generative AI for credit checking in your insurance company, they already have the architecture blueprint. Now, me as a technologist will take that blueprint and make some tweaks to make it customizable, but they still have the architecture for a lot of high-level use cases, which is helpful. So my recommendation always is go with the cloud and build it out. Yes, you need somebody who understands cloud, and you need a generative AI engineer, but you go with that. Whereas if you can buy an off-the-shelf product for insurance tech, for example, who does credit checking, but will they be, if it's a startup, have they got funding, and will they be in existence? That's the biggest question mark, right? So, but even for a startup, which I've done in the fintech startup, we used a public cloud, which is Microsoft. It's not so expensive. If you want to factor in cost, I think cloud is even cheaper because it will only charge you for the usage of the tokens and the other things, compute.
Yeah. So I want to talk about data and I want to talk about cost, right? So you mentioned in that, say you have your own proprietary data. There's a lot of conversations about having to create a data lake. And there's a lot of conversations of this concept of ETL,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
Extract, transform, and
Load.
right?
Mhm.
And what I understand and what we focus on too is that like there's a lot of structured and unstructured data. How do you get that data clean enough
Mhm.
so it actually is put in a place where you can create, leverage AI and machine learning to create decisions and insights or get decisions and create insights from the actual data. So could you speak to us in terms of, say, in that particular scenario? Because that's always a question. Well, where does the data go? What does a data lake actually look like? How do you construct it? So
Yeah.
could you kind of share your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you rightly mentioned, there is structured and unstructured data. And just to demystify these big words, is that anything that you have definition, so you are a giant or a grocery store and everyday people are buying things, right? So, that is an example of what we call structured data because that thing has a name, bread. It has a number and a description, and bread was $2.99, that has a cost. So that's an example of structured data. Same, the grocery store has images of bread and tomatoes. That is an example of unstructured data. Now, for structured data, which is everyday grocery store has, say, 10 million records of all the things people have bought, people have returned. That's all structured data. And where you want to store it will be a data lake. A data lake is nothing but, think of it as it sounds, it's just a huge place where you store this data. But think when it comes to about data lake, the main thing you have to remember is it is for the structured data. So if you are a grocery store and you have 10,000 or 10 million records of all the sales and returns, that is structured data because it has the structure of all things you're buying and the cost and everything, right, in a structured manner. So you store it in a data lake, and all the big cloud providers have a data lake. The way you take it, like if you're a grocery store clerk and you just swipe and somebody paid for it, it can go directly into your data lake. That's called real time. Or if you can wait end of the day and you can put the 10 million records in your data lake. That's called a batch process. So that's structured. When it comes to unstructured, think of it as images and documents and all
PDFs
these
and all the things that are hanging around.
right?
Yes.
And those you typically don't use. You could store it in a storage, but not necessarily a data lake. Those you can directly feed it to your RAG without much, because what is the biggest advantage of your large language model is these things that previously machines were not able to read properly, PDF and images, now they can. So those you don't need a data lake per se. You can directly feed it to your RAG and then to your large language model through a prompt. So that's the biggest difference. And with the data lake, it's a lot about the structured data.
Okay, so I just want to summarize that. So in general, every cloud provider has some structure for a data lake.
Correct. A tool,
right?
Yeah.
So, because some people have information, say they're in marketing in their CRM systems and other things. So
Yes.
does that all get attached to that cloud tool?
If you want to establish a data lake,
yes,
and you want the data lake to combine, I did marketing campaign for my bread this week. I want to see how effective it is. So you take your marketing data and you combine it with your sales data to truly analyze. And you bring those two data into your data lake. And Amazon has Redshift and other things, and Microsoft has its own tools. There's also a very, very popular product nowadays called Databricks. So
yes,
you use your tool of choice to create that lake.
And then there's data rails for CFOs. That's a big one. So I think that's just, I wanted to make that distinction here because I think that's where people get confused. They're like, well, we have lots of pockets of data. How do we, bring it together? But what if we just, have a CRM? Can that be our data lake, right? So that was very helpful. The second part of the question is around cost, right? And so something like that, I think that's always like, okay, I have a startup, that's always our cost question to us is like, well, what is it going to cost us? And maybe you could help navigate some of the, so what are the sort of the core things that create a cost structure?
Correct. That's a great question. I would say 4 or 5 categories of costs. First is infrastructure costs, which you're paying for your cloud provider. And even if you use off-the-shelf product, they have factored in the infrastructure costs because off-the-shelf products are built on one of these clouds. So they use, under the infrastructure, whatever is used for compute will be one, but with generative AI, tokens is a cost you will need to consider. And once you start developing something, so people say, oh, can you estimate? See, Amazon and everybody has published their token cost, but there's no definition of a token. If you give a
Can you maybe explain this a little bit more? Because I want people to understand what tokens are. I mean, like a little deeper, right? So it's just in a layman fashion.
Yeah. So if you feed, so for example, you're asking ChatGPT a question. Okay, I am starting a new candle company. What are some marketing strategies for me? That's a question. And depending on how long the sentence is, you're feeding that question at the back to a large language model. And there, what the large language model will do is will actually break down your sentences into words. Now, a couple of words form a token. Now, how many words? We don't know that. It depends, I think, on their compute power and the GPU and the processing. So truly the way, so AWS has published, or ChatGPT, OpenAI has published, this is the token cost. They have published. But looking at a sentence, you cannot say how many tokens they are. The only way you can test it is you feed it a document, say it is a 1 page, then you see your token cost. And then you can calculate, oh, if 1 page actually with this 300 words costed me this much, this is how it would cost.
So there's infrastructure, then there's token costs. And token costs are not crazy expensive right now.
They're not right now.
Yeah.
But what is the most expensive component that I'm seeing right now is RAG. They're charging a lot, both AWS and so for it, just to compare, if your EC2 compute costs about 200, RAG is costing 1,200, like for, say, 500 documents.
So let's just put that in layman's terms. So when you create a RAG, you're creating your own knowledge base.
Yeah.
And you're putting in a lot of data of your own. And so in a way, I mean, it's your own. So for them, they're like, well, it's your proprietary information. You want to keep it safe and safeguarded and all that. We're going to charge you.
Yeah, they're going to charge. And not only that, again, not to get too jargony,
yes.
The power of RAG is what it creates a vector database. And what it means is that if you fed it 9,000 documents, and say, for example, for the city of Washington, D.C., we gave all the information that is needed for the resident of D.C. Permits and residents, if you have potholes, all this information that D.C. has a website will maintain, you have fed 9,000 documents. Now, one resident will go and ask, hey, I have a pothole on my road. How do I complain about it to the D.C. government? It has to quickly look at the 9,000 and pull it. And that's only possible if you create something at the back end called vector index. And what RAG does is it automatically creates vector indexes to make that search very fast. So that's where our money is going, because it's a superpower tool.
It's a super powerful. No, it's like a force multiplier, right?
Exactly.
But this is how, all of the information you have, and if you have some sort of solution that you're like trying to take those insights from so your consumer experience can be better. This is like an exact example of what's happening on the back end.
Back end, exactly.
Okay. And so infrastructure, token, again, depending on if it's RAG or not, that has an additional cost. What else goes into any other cost?
Then your actual services, right? So I usually talk in terms of pods. In order for you to implement, say, even a prototype, I take a pod of 4 people that are needed. One is you start with a business analyst who will come and write user stories in the agile term, just gather requirements. And then you have an actual, like I would say, 2 engineers. One is a generative AI. And then basically you need a software engineer, because the generative AI is at the back end. You need somebody to expose the front end user interface. So if you have 4 people for a startup, I would call it a pod. But then you can always add like testers and things like that. But in a startup, you become the tester as a business, as a product owner or what have you.
Right. Is that all the costs?
Yeah. I mean, that will...
And ongoing maintenance and
all that. But this is foundation for a pod of a simple use case you want to quickly prototype, right? And I will even give you a swag based on my implementation. It will take you anywhere but between 150 to 250K.
Yeah. And so, I wanted to spend a little time there because there's a lot of questions on, well, what does it even take, right?
Yeah.
And that's, and I think it really also varies depending on who's actually helping and supporting you and how complicated and
The use
advanced it is, the
cases,
use
yeah.
cases.
Mhm.
Do you believe these costs are going to get cheaper?
I think definitely the infrastructure costs are going to get cheaper, but the consulting will be, I would say, in the next 2 to 3 years, not so cheap, but over a period of time. Because again, it's supply demand. You have fewer generative AI, machine learning engineers. I think that pond of people will increase, so that costs will get cheap.
So let's talk about this world of the power of AI and ML and tools that now you can use for coding and you can use for some of these things. Do you think that, because I know you can prototype pretty quickly
Mhm.
using, specific tools they are in the marketplace. Do you think that's going to impact the consulting market in this space?
A little bit. I think, first of all, the code generation, yes, if you're a startup, it's very easy. You can quickly generate the code, but you need a superpower engineer to review that code and see if
Absolutely.
it's the right code. That's one. I think it's very easy, but I think where the power of consulting comes is that, yes, you can ask, I'm starting a new candle company, please do some go-to-market strategy for you. But I think this is where the humans win over AI, because the power for consulting is truly going and understanding the business domain, number one. Number two, understanding their pain points and the players in the ecosystem to truly do that go-to-market. That is where I think when the rubber meets the road, the humans will do it. And I think it will help consulting companies accelerate, but not necessarily take away.
Yeah, we see that too. That's why
Mhm.
Virgent was born, right? Because we're like, there's going to be a long period of time that people need that level of expertise to help them strategically think about what's the highest impact, highest ROI,
Yeah,
lowest effort when it comes to AI that's solving real business problems.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a good segue to move into your enterprise side, right?
Mhm.
Because you have a tremendous amount of experience in this side, and I know one of the things that you shared with me around implementations are some challenges that
Mhm.
are occurring today. So maybe if you could speak to a key sort of use case and kind of walk us through, just like from the idea concept to where some of the challenges may have come, and like what are some breakthroughs that within this infrastructure layer and other things, because I think it'll be important to hear that from you.
Yeah. So without, again, not giving away too many details about the client and stuff like that. So we do have a use case of using generative AI to be a chatbot for the internal employees, especially for business development. So if you're a McKinsey or a Deloitte, or even if you're a mid-sized consulting company, you respond to RFPs or you make presentations to your potential customers, and half the time will be spent, the longer you're in business, to search through your data. Oh, if you're an IT service provider and a customer is saying, hey, I want XYZ technology, you might have done it like 10 years ago, but how do you search quickly and get those answers? So we're developing a generative AI chatbot to quickly search that information of past performance, relevant performance, and pull that data. So that's the use case to reduce the business development team's time in focusing on finding the information and more on going and meeting customers, because the time they focus here is the time lost meeting customers. So that's the true business case there. That's the use case. And so in this, the struggle has been ongoing for 3 months. It's not a joke at this point. We are in calls with AWS every day. Our corpus of information is on SharePoint. And with SharePoint, there's a lot of authentication mechanisms that is in place truly to prevent external entities breaking into your organization's very valuable information. But
it's a good guardrails to have.
it's a good guardrails.
Yeah.
But the way the generative AI works, and especially the RAG works, it has to learn from your SharePoint. And fortunately, they have 2 or 3 tools in Amazon for RAG. The main thing is AWS Kendra. It is unable to get to the SharePoint. They cannot go over the authentication mechanisms, whatever they have built in. We first went through documentation, then we got into calls, and we are still debugging that. So it is a true pain point even as we speak. So if we extract all our SharePoint and put it in a third-party system like a storage space, like an S3, it would work. But we will be double paying the cost then for SharePoint and a third-party tool. So we don't want to do that. We want the tool to connect to SharePoint, but because it has all these authentication mechanisms, it's not able to connect. We did test it by going and putting it in an external system, a few documents, and it works fine, but it doesn't connect to a SharePoint. So that's one. Secondly, the latency, right? So if it's you can't expect any real-time use case. Unlike machine learning, you can do, but in generative AI, because large language models are slow because they've been built on top of the internet knowledge base, it is slow. So that's another use case. So if we want in real time, somebody is newly joined or we uploaded a new document just today, it won't give us in real time if we ask a question. It could be like, it takes 8 minutes right now to process it.
Okay.
So maybe for internal, we can live with it. But if you truly expose, I have other use cases, we expose it in a website, then you don't expect, especially if it's customer facing, we're not used to waiting 8 minutes on a website. We are moving on to our next whatever. So those are some true challenges that we are facing.
In terms of if I was a CEO today of a mid-size or enterprise company, what are the core things that I really need to be thinking about to help with the transformation of AI in my organization?
Yeah, so this is a very pertinent. I'm just starting a video series of 6 things that CEOs ask about AI in an organization. One is the topmost and most enterprises that I'm working with actually say no to generative AI specifically is security and privacy concerns. Second is responsible AI and ethical AI concerns, because I think they have a bad rap in the market in general. Third is the cost. People think when they think of Gen AI or AI that it's overwhelmingly expensive without knowing the cost. And fourth is really identifying the use case because they don't know the art of possibility for their industry.
That's right.
And 5 is what does it take, right, in terms of infrastructure and resources. So those are the 5 things. And I do workshops and I have a framework called Growth that helps with all these things like governance and identifying readiness and use cases. But these are the 5 questions for sure that are top of mind for CEOs. And the interesting thing is, once we start educating them, each of these questions is solved. It's already solved. And I try to present in their industry, other players in their industry where they have implemented successfully just to get the juices flowing, but also brainstorm truly what their goals are. So for example, I did a AI strategy for the city of Virginia Beach, and the city council members had a huge citywide strategy. This is not an IT or tech strategy, right? They have a citywide strategy and they had themes. They had invigorate and empower and envision as their themes. So I truly went to the city council and had conversations with them to understand what is the idea behind the themes, what do they want to achieve, and everything mapped to citizen engagement. So I took those, and they had 52 AI use cases. I mapped those 52 to these 3 cities' themes. So this is truly take your business goals and try to map your use case to your business goals. That's when, it will click in this, whether it is a city council member or a business unit head. That's when it is what's in it for them and you're able to map that use case to their goals, that's when it really resonated with them.
Yeah, I love that because I think, at the end of the day, again, it's about solving real business problems that they're challenged with and understanding truly, and you mentioned this, and I think we see this a lot, is like once they start to see like this technology, this is actually possible today, everything changes. Yeah. And the more you can show people, I think that's when a lot of the light bulbs hit. So I'm curious, like because I think that moment where people can see, oh my, this took me so long and now it's taking me seconds, like that is one of those like aha, oh shit moments, as I call them. But like it starts to change the perspective of like that, if that's possible, what else? What else can we do, right? Yeah. And I think I'm a true believer of like, I think the technologists obviously need to know what's happening and they need to be helping and championing and leading the charge, but the CEO and the business leaders need to be fully educated to really understand,
absolutely.
because that's when I think innovation really opens up, right? And people can see even more of what the opportunity lies where the technology is today and potentially in the future. What have you found in terms of employee sentiment right now with these sort of changes in these larger enterprises that you've worked in?
It's no different when I did traditional ERP software engineering. There's always like those early adopters, and then there are like skeptical people, and then there are the naysayers. So it's the same with AI. Since I've been in the tech industry for so long, I see that way with everything. With AI, I think the new thing is add to that change management is also this fear that it will take away the jobs, which it was there a little bit in ERP and software, but it's more, I think AI, the news stories have created those stories in people's heads. Like I said, in the comedy show, people were like, oh, sentient. I was like, I don't see that happening anytime soon. So that new fear is also there. So it's that how do we work with the early adopters to bring at least the skeptics to the table, and then the naysayers will be the last ones to address. But truly, it starts with the business leader. If the business leader is a naysayer, then we can't do anything. That's going to be a few months in convincing them, but you have to pick your battles. If the business leader is a visionary, which City of Virginia Beach, the CIOs, city council members are all visionaries. They all want to go all in for AI, and I help them identify, map it to the business goals, and also map use a decision matrix for prioritizing which use cases to go after first and then implement.
So if I, again, talking about the narrative that you've seen on both sides, what's the narrative that you see a lot of leaders talking about when they're visionaries in a sense of where they see the potential and possibility with AI versus the opposite, right? Like what's the narrative that they're sharing internally and in the market?
I think the narrative is truly, I think what it brings us back to the very first question that you asked, right? The business leaders and the visionary thinkers and the early adopters are all saying one thing, that this AI, especially with the power of generative AI, it's a game changer for their operational, not only to automate their operations smoothly and seamlessly, or in terms of if you're talking about public sector citizen services, but also to reduce costs, right? Because there's so many paper-based and people pushing papers that takes time and effort that truly reduces cost as well. So they are truly understanding the business impact and ROI already before implementing.
I love it. So I'm going to play a little business roulette with you. You ready?
Okay, this is new.
This is new.
Okay.
And then we could play along and you get a second to think or whatever I'm going to say in industry. And what comes to your mind? You're a solutionist, right? So what comes to your mind as like some top line solutions that can be AI can really help and support either from a productivity and efficiency and innovation, or something that's just going to move the needle from a disruption perspective.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
So let's talk about dentist's office.
I love that, because when you asked me, I was thinking of healthcare.
There you go.
There's
there's definitely a lot in healthcare. Well, let's start with dentist.
Yeah, with the dentist's office, I have one right off the back of my head. So the dentist office, if it's for more complex use cases, use AI for recommendation of the diagnosis, images, patient education. This is directly doctor usage. And then when dentist actually says, hey, you need to have x-rays and you need to have these follow-ups, use an AI agent to automatically make those scheduling. That's it. And it's like both for dentists to make their job easy, and also for the patient to make my job easy, so I don't have to make like 5 phone calls or appointments. So you're getting better patient outcomes at the same time. The dentist is also benefited.
I love it. What about professional services companies?
Professional services, like I said, there's a lot of generative AI bots they can use. One for, like I said, the business development is a professional services company. Find out the use cases where your team is taking a long time. We truly had a small business development team that was taking a long time searching for the relevant information. So we're reducing the time and increasing operational efficiency. So something for the employees to make search quicker. I would say in general, AI-powered search is very good to have, whether it is for their clients or for their internal employees.
Where do you see in terms of like content marketing agencies? Anything there?
Yeah, I think it's super interesting because I always feel like my hidden life is like a marketing person, and I do a lot of like these playing with marketing. Like I've done a lot of TikTok. It's called Pink in Tech, and I play around with the marketing and some ideas around that. But I think what won't go away if you love the show Mad Men is the true creativity that humans bring to the table, because all said and done, I believe generative AI or AI is aping humans, right? It's only learning from what we feed it and then extracting some more information. But end of the day, human creativity could not be replaced. But again, they can expedite the process using all the newest videos and, audio and also image producing technologies. But I think truly their creativity is the starting point that you should not forget.
Restaurants and hospitality.
I have not done much in the restaurant space, but I can get creative, like super creative in the restaurant space. Like when you go, I do have a very good example, which I blogged about when I went on a trip to Florida. At the beach, I was at this restaurant that had the images generated by AI displayed, and it had a seafood theme. So it actually showed all these captains, eating their food and all. And it was very interesting to note while I was there that all these AI generative images were even being displayed. I think that could be a use case where instead of the boring menus, they can definitely display some AI generated images. They can do a lot more in terms of marketing for sure. But hospitality is huge. Like we have Marriott here and Hilton. So from customer and guest services to back-end operating of the hotels, that there's a lot to be said there.
What's the most exciting industry, or who are you most excited for, knowing what this technology can do and you're aligned to, right? Because it goes back to some of our early part of the conversation. It's like things can be solved that we never once thought possible, and those outcomes can be very game-changing. So is there an industry that you
would say, being in DC, it may sound cliched, but there's so much potential in public sector. And I have a newsletter, public sector use cases of AI, and I have created some scenarios where AI could be used so much more in citizen services, whether it's to do taxes and whether it is DMV or whether even healthcare research. NIH does so much research, right? So I think public sector, there's so much potential, like some Eastern European smaller countries have implemented, like they can do self-service taxes. There's a lot of self-service possibilities. And truly, I think as a technologist, I'm very excited. This is true emergence of multiple technologies coming together. Like countries like Estonia have implemented blockchain for citizen identification along with AI for citizen inquiries, right? So that possibility of meshing multiple technologies and enhancing citizen experience, I think it's super interesting to me.
I love that. Is there any last minute advice, thoughts if people are focused on implementing real solutions using the technology as it is today and knowing that it's going to just get more and more powerful? What's your word of advice?
I think word of advice is don't be fearful. Identify your use case sooner than later and start implementing.
I love that. Before we end, I did want to ask you about one really important body of work that you do, which is for the United Nations, right? And I didn't want to miss that because I find, this is such a large opportunity with all the SDGs and everything that's going on. And you're leading the strategy for AI for the United Nations, and that's a big deal.
Yes.
So maybe could you share, how you went about it? What does that look like, especially with, they have multiple goals.
Yes.
17
right?
SDGs,
yeah,
right?
It's super, super interesting project. I just get ghost flesh thinking about it because I call it my passion project because I love sustainability, and me and my son are always, debating ideas about more sustainable solutions. But so it's like I was so grateful when I got this opportunity. So essentially, United Nations initiated a LinkedIn for sustainability called Sustain Chain. So it's a platform. It's a public utility platform. So if you are an innovator in sustainability, you just register there. But what truly drives the AI is that, so we have all these different players on that. We have about 5,000 members now on the platform who are either innovators with innovative solutions, regenerative agriculture. I also, when I went for Anga, I came to know about eradicating modern slavery. Things of that nature, people are active on the platform. And what the AI does is, just like LinkedIn, it will connect you. Hey, if you're in regenerative agriculture, I am actually in an adjacent space, maybe not using chemical fertilizers. So it will recommend to connect us.
Like a marketplace connector.
Yeah, yeah. And not marketplace it's a nonprofit, obviously. So it's more about around the sustainability goals. So what the AI engine does is actually it takes not only the 17 sustainability goals, we subdivided the 17 into 55, what we called as the focus areas of sustainability. So we take all that knowledge. We also see what sort of activity I'm doing. So you can make posts or like things. And the other true differentiator is also we have a lot of impact investors on the platform. So if you're an innovator or a startup in the sustainability map to those SDGs, you will be recommended this impact investor because they might be interested in a particular SDG. We also have integrated the platform to the 64 campuses of SUNY, the state universities of New York. And also we have integrated with XPRIZE, which runs the largest prize in sustainability space. So they can, with one hop, go from their platform to our platform. So we are bringing researchers and innovators into the ecosystem. And the AI, we are at an inflection point. We implemented it in using older technology, reinforcement learning engine, and now we are moving it to LLM.
So is this one of their biggest strategies, using AI to help support this called the back and forth? That's not a marketplace, but the connective tissue
tissue. And the other thing is, if we notice areas where there's, in the 17 sustainability development goals, if there are areas where there is no action, we also nudge people to say, hey, why is there no action here, right? And we have this 3D visualization called mission control that showcases all the moving parts. So it's a true engine. There's a platform. Our AI is called Da Vinci. And then we have this 3D visualization called mission control that actually speak together and think of it as, hey, here is where sustainability activity is happening, but here is where it's not happening. How can our platform accelerate something that has to take place where inaction is there?
So listen, Swathi, what I love about this conversation, we talked a lot about different stages of companies and different implementation, challenges and opportunities with using AI. And you went through from startups to enterprise to government, and now it's just like more in like the world of sustainability, right? Which really has a major impact using these types of technologies to do things that we've never been able to do before. That seems to be the theme of this.
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
Podcast.
Yeah.
So, I'm really grateful for you to be on. Thank you so much
for
sharing.
having me.
Yeah, thank you for sharing your knowledge. For those of you who are listening this week, please like, comment, and share this podcast, because the more you do, the more I can bring on continuously amazing guests like Swathi and really help, educate you in terms of where we are with AI today and where we're headed tomorrow, and really unlock innovation for you. So thank you for listening in to this episode, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Seema.
That's a wrap for this episode of the AI CEO podcast. If you found today's conversation valuable, don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. It helps me reach more leaders like you and continue bringing in top AI-first founders, industry experts, and visionary CEOs to share their insights. AI is evolving fast, and the CEOs who harness it today will lead tomorrow. Stay ahead of the curve, keep learning, and keep building. Thanks for tuning in, and see you next time.